Story 1. Around Thanksgiving 2017, my wife's company offered her a fantastic promotion, which she accepted even though it meant moving across the state by January 1st. The month of December was insanity list and sell the house, find a short-term rental which would accept 4 pets, pack, move, etc. A lot of alcohol magically disappeared, but I got it all done, and we moved into our rental house, and all was well. We bought our new home and moved, and the rental lease officially ended on April 1st. The property manager followed the state laws correctly so far, and we were told we'd get the $1,800 owed for our security deposit back by May. Spoiler alert, it never came. I spent the next 4 months going back and forth with the property manager and hearing, "It's coming. We never got your paperwork," and other excuses. I got sick of this and got 2 different lawyers involved and sent them official demand letters. I also filed a formal complaint with the State Division of Real Estate against their license. The property manager kept telling the state investigators that they would pay us back, but nothing ever happened. I didn't want to formally sue via our lawyer because he charges $300 per hour, and it's all up front. I was hesitant to go to small claims court because it's a $5,000 maximum in our state, and the damages we're legally owed are 3 times the $1,800 deposit, which puts us over that cap. So I'd have to give up on some of the damages we're legally entitled to seek, eat roughly $500 total in fees, and then go through that whole process for the next year. Assuming we won the judgment, we'd then go through the collection process for another year or 2. It was an option, one we'd win, but a big pain in my backside. So this is where the pro-revenge comes in. It was initially petty. Let's say their website is crappypropertymanager.com. I bought Crappy Property Manager Co. for $12 and posted all of my screenshots and info about their theft and nonsense for the world to see. And then I shared it all over their business Facebook pages as well as the personal pages for the main partners and their Yelp page. I got a kick out of it. They took their pages down. Petty revenge wins, right? My little website caused a bigger boom than I anticipated. Basically, this property management company has 2 principal agents in charge and a broker. One of the agents is married to the broker. Beneath them, they had 5 realtors. I sent my new website to them all, everywhere I could. It turns out the partner who isn't married to the broker had no idea that the broker and his wife were stealing money from the property management company. Their realtors had no idea. Either 2 of them quit immediately, and one reached out to me to let me know why she quit and that she was going to a new broker. But the other principal of the company was mortified. She asked me to leave her name out of it, take the stuff down, etc. And I just politely but coldly replied that, "Hey, your business partner's broker stole my money, and I can back everything I'm saying with documents, not my problem." She promised she'd get things resolved, and for the first time in 10 months, the broker started answering my emails. We worked out a deal, and they're now paying us $200 per month until December, which will cover the amount owed plus the extra for our legal fees. The first check came last week. It actually bounced, but I made them send me a cashier's check, and they have to send cashier's checks going forward. So we did get our first installment. I've also learned that the state investigation has been turned over to the state's legal department, and the broker and his wife will likely lose their license. The state investigator said they had multiple complaints against them, but I was the most thorough and had the most documentation against them. So our complaint was a big reason they had the ammunition to push it to the legal team. So all told, my crappy little website ended up costing them 40% of their real estate team, resulted in them removing their business Facebook listings, pushed the investigation into their license over to a state legal team still ongoing, and resulted in them having to finally start paying us not only the $1,800 we're owed, but the legal fees I spent on top of it. Oh, and that bounce check? I made them send me a certified check for $12 to cover the bank fee for that, too. From March until October, we received the checks for $200 a month without issue. They were a few days late sometimes, but they arrived, so I went with it. The initial March check had bounced, but they sent certified checks after that, so it also wasn't a huge deal. Then October hits. They don't send a certified check, but since they'd been good all year, and we were nearing the end, I deposited it. It shouldn't be a shock that it bounced, so I emailed them to get this fixed. The property manager says, "Sorry, I goofed. Since we only owe you $600, I'll send you one check now for $312, half plus the bounce check fee and the rest in December. I agree. Weeks passed, nothing. So I reach back out in early December and finally get a check, but it's only for $200. I was fed up with their games and with this nonsense hitting almost the 2-year mark, so I stuck to the deadline and said I expected the remaining $412 by December 15th. The 15th comes and goes, so I email again on the 16th. And what do you know? Radio silence. Totally ignored. So I waited until the 23rd, right before Christmas, and just sent them a short email saying exactly that the website was going back up and I'd resume legal actions since they decided not to honor our new written agreement. The partner who got the repayment process started in the first place finally had enough and snapped and said she couldn't deal with this over Christmas and that she'd repay me herself to be done with this. I received our final check for $412 today. After 2 years of this nonsense, it's finally over, and I have all of our security deposit returned plus some to cover my legal fees and certified mail costs. The total fallout on their end: 3 of their 5 realtors ended up leaving based on my website. They had to repay me everything they owed, and I didn't let them off the hook. And I just used the state tool to look up their real estate license, and the license hearing did not go their way. And their license is on probation with 11 complaints filed against it, which will all require repayment and remediation, with the most recent complaint being an internal administrative complaint based on my actions, which will likely result in them losing their license altogether in 2020, although that's just an assumption. But a likely one since the administrative complaint is the most recent and is wholly open. 9 months later, I got curious and bored and hopped on the state license portal to see what had happened. When we left off in 2019, they had the 11 open complaints, 10 of which were from renters and 1 from the state itself. That was the one which had me curious. The state closed out my case and 9 others in June of 2019, which put their license on probation for a year, gave them courses to take, and some whopping fines which were basically nothing. I don't know how they messed up, but the state complaint got taken higher and into this year, and as of July 2020, their license has been completely revoked. Not just the business license for XX real estate, but the personal license for the jerk who fooled me around, too. I got my money back, and they're out of business partly because of me. I will take it. Story 2. I've really liked this girl for a while that I met at a lifeguard certification course, and I talked to her while I was there, and I thought ended up hitting it off. We exchanged numbers and social media and all that. And we messaged for a few weeks before I asked her out to a movie, which she accepted. We'd been going on casual dates, nothing too serious, and we weren't hanging out at my place or her place, even though I'd hinted at the idea. For a few weeks before, one of her friends, someone that was also at the lifeguarding course that I met and kept in contact with because he was cool, sends me a screenshot of a conversation between him and my girlfriend, and it goes like this. Him: aren't you and this guy going out now? Girlfriend: not really, but as long as he keeps paying for everything, I'll let him take me out more. Girls gotta eat. Him: why you gotta do him like that? He said he felt bad for me because I was nice and that she does this often to other guys. After seeing this, I asked her to go on a nice date with me to a hibachi grill restaurant. $20, $40 dollar plates and premium desserts are served here. I got the most expensive thing they had, and so did she. We both got fancy ice cream and multiple refills on drinks. I complimented her a lot and smiled consistently before getting up to go to the bathroom and leaving. I was also her ride. About 45 minutes after, I get furious texts from her saying that she had to have her mom come down and pay for it because she didn't have the money on her and that we were done. I know it's not a lot, and it stinks because I thought she was actually into me, but it felt pretty nice leaving her that way. Story 3. This is partly my revenge, partly my sister's, both of us really proud. This is going to be long, so here's our cast. My sister, will call her Sarah. Sister's ex-boyfriend, Paul. Ex-boyfriend's new wife, Jane. Ex-boyfriend's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe. Oldest brother, Zeke. Our parents and me. When I was 14 and my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged, and they were really happy. For a time, Sarah had a horrible pregnancy, About 16-18 weeks in, the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hypermesis, which, if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes, and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, "Your body is built to do this, it can't be that bad." Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandchild and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday. Even one as small as Valentine's Day, her birthday, sometimes falls on Easter, and she hates it because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, "Well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him." Again, my sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor. My little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation, they discovered that the back of her uterus facing her spinal cord had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking in my brother's words like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork, as she should have been out of surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow people, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, who was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father, and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished, and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local hair salon. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be a jerk and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now, at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentlemen, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, "I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Brantley, eh? You know the ones I'm talking about." And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said, "What about Sarah?" My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by checking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her and to also remind him to pay his child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to dislike when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val.